While laptops are getting thinner and lighter every year, models like the Razer GE78HX show us that at least for right now, desktop replacements like this one still have their place, at least for some users. And so if you're in the market for a ludicrous laptop that can go head to head with full-size gaming PCs while still allowing you to occasionally hit the road with your gaming rig, then the Razer GE78HX 13V might make its way to your shortlist. In fact, there's a very similar yet slightly upgraded version to this laptop called the 13VH43, which is priced currently at $25.99. And for its specs, it's one of the best deals you can get in 2023. New for this year, we do have a slightly upgraded design, which of course has that really cool Mystic Light retro bar that, in my opinion, looks very similar to the Ioniq 5. There's also a few other adjustments here to make it ergonomically a little bit more comfortable, some slightly rounder edges. Without a doubt, this is definitely a gaming laptop. It's also not a lightweight one, tipping the scales at 6.83 pounds and measuring 14.97 inches by 11.73 by 1.13. Even compared to laptops with identical specs, this is far from the most portable. Again, this laptop is intended as a desktop replacement rather than something you're taking frequently with you on the go. I mean, just carrying its massive 330 watt power adapter on its own is a workout. And of course, battery life won't keep you gaming for that long, let alone browsing the web for extended periods. But in my opinion, given how big this is and some of the cheesiness overall with some of the design elements here, like that fake grille and some of the trim on the back, it's not quite my style. Rather, it's what you can get inside that makes this so special. The updated GE78 lineup is available in configurations that start with the Core i9-13950HX and 140 watt RTX 4070 GPU, as well as the lower resolution 1920 by 1200 165 Hz IPS display. On the top end, you can upgrade to an i9-13980HX with the 175 RTX 4090 and the better 2560 by 1600 240 Hz IPS display with up to 64 gigabytes of RAM. Under the hood, our review unit is powered by the Intel Core i9-13950HX and an RTX 4080. But for those who want the best bang for your buck, you definitely want to check out this model, which has the i9-13980HX, 32 gigabytes of RAM, a 1TB NVMe SSD, the RTX 4080, and the 17-inch QHD plus 240 Hz display. Just as with MSI's other lineups, there are usually one or two configurations that have very competitive pricing that completely undercuts the rest of the competition. For example, the next cheapest option is the Asus ROG Strix Scar 16, which offers similar specs but with a smaller 16-inch display, but still costs more at $2,900. That said, MSI has put a priority on performance and cooling with this. It can certainly get loud, it can certainly get very warm, but at the end of the day, you're getting some incredible benchmark results, and as we'll share, it can get pretty close to a full-size desktop. When compared with last year's Razer GE77 series, which featured an all-black matte design with minimal branding, this year's GE78 instead takes a different approach. Now this 17-inch 2560 by 1600 display is certainly beautiful, and let's be honest, 240 Hz is more than enough for most people. The 16 by 10 aspect ratio is another new addition to the Razer lineup, providing a taller screen, which is typically seen on more productivity work laptops, but it's been slowly making its way to most of MSI's other lineups over the past few years. But you'll probably notice it doesn't have the thinnest bezels. At the top here, understandably, we have a little bit more chunk because we have our webcam, which also has that physical shutter. Likewise, at the bottom, we do have a little bit extra bezel where we have the MSI logo. For connectivity, we have the latest killer Wi-Fi 6E AX1690i and Bluetooth 5.3. We've also got really good port selection. On the left, we have a Thunderbolt 4 port, an SD card slot, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. But unlike a lot of laptops, we can actually move to the back and we'll find an Ethernet port, HDMI 2.1, and another USB Type-C port, as well as, of course, the power jack. On the right side, we have a pair of USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-A and a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C. One of the other changes compared to last year's model are the more durable hinges for the monitor on its sides here. This should translate to better reliability and longevity, but we now have this gap at the bottom here. I find a little bit interesting as I open this to its max viewing angle, which is probably about 120 degrees, is that fake I don't even know what you would call it there, almost grille design. We have red trim on the outside, but this plasticky, again, grill-like shape. At first I thought, well, that's not a speaker. Is that for air intake? No, it's completely solid. What's the point? And you might be able to tell, I can put my fingernail under there and kind of lift it up. I'm sure with enough pressure, I could probably pop it off. Now, in honesty, it's not my favorite choice. And considering that a lot of their laptops for the past few years have been doing a great job at transitioning into something that's not just gaming, but can also be used for work and school without screaming, hey, I'm a powerful computer, I got all this LED and flashiness. But of course, one of the coolest things with this laptop is the updated light bar. And as I said, it has that retro yet very modern look. We now have the individual lights as opposed to the previous models, which were completely diffused, giving it a more seamless look. And that said, within the SteelSeries app, you still have a lot of customization for it to really make it your own. The GE78's full-size keyboard also includes a number pad, as well as arrow keys that are highlighted that also double as shortcuts to add rect tile to the screen, change the fan speeds, pause or play media playback, as well as turn off the touchpad or turn it on. Of course, this wouldn't be a Raider laptop without per key controls and effects via the SteelSeries app. Even better, within the app, you can also sync it with other elements like the MSI logo on the lid or any other compatible accessories, including mice. The glass trackpad is also large and provides a smooth, responsive experience with no clunky clicks, no matter where you press. A big change from last year, though, is that they've actually moved the trackpad to the center rather than off to the left side, which I found a little bit awkward before. In terms of quality, the Raider does well. There's minimal creaking and just a little bit of flex with pressure applied to the outer lid. However, it is worth noting that it lacks that unibody design found on competitors like the Razer Blade 18. So whether or not you love this design, and maybe you don't even care much for its keyboard or trackpad, it's the hardware and the performance inside that makes this really special. And it's important to note, and you may have heard some of it throughout this review, but while it's in its extreme performance mode, even when it's not running anything, this thing can get quite loud. Quickly hitting over 50 decibels, you'll probably want to invest in some good over-the-ear noise-canceling headphones as you play on this beast. So now let me just read you off a couple of our gaming benchmark results here. For some popular games, we've got Spider-Man Remastered on very high preset with DLAA at 1600p. We got about 85 to 110 frames per second. Cyberpunk 2077 on Ultra with RTX DLSS off. At 1440p, we got about 75 frames per second. Hogwarts Legacy honestly is not a very well optimized game, still has its share of bugs and quirks, but on Ultra with RTX set to Ultra, I did set DLSS to auto, as otherwise your frames per second would probably be in the 50s to 60s. But with that set to Ultra at 1600p, we usually got about 105 to 112 frames per second. And the same applies for Gotham Knights. Again, not a very well optimized game, though with some recent updates, it's gotten a little bit better. On its highest preset with RTX on, without upscaling, at 1600p, we got about 95 to 125 frames per second. But importantly, with this laptop, you can play most AAA games at 100 plus frames per second on their highest settings at the native resolution of this display. Of course, dropping down to higher or high, down to 1080p, that's where you can get 200 plus, maybe even 300 plus for certain games like Overwatch 2, which are obviously less demanding. Now, as great as those benchmark results are, the one thing I do want to point out is the amount of performance loss you get when you unplug it, and it's just running on its battery. In certain tests, for example, in Cinebench R23, our scores dropped to 7,733, and that's a 70% loss in performance compared to when it's plugged in. And while it is common for Windows laptops to not be as powerful when they are unplugged, it goes to show that these components really do need to be plugged in to be taken full advantage of. Now, if there's one key takeaway with this review, is that this offers impressive performance. And again, while I'm not the biggest fan of its design, I definitely appreciate the value it offers for these specs. And again, when compared to other full-size desktops, whether it's the Aegis RS or the the StarForge Voyager, which we reviewed a couple months ago, you're getting about 80 to 90% performance of an i7 13700K with an NVIDIA RTX 4070 Ti and 32 gigabytes of RAM. And while you can find a lot of cheaper models than the StarForge Voyager, the fact that you're only paying an additional $200 to $300 to basically get 80 to 90% of that performance, but in a more arguably portable version that also has a really nice display, a good trackpad, a good keyboard. You know, this is also a really great deal if you need top of the line performance that you occasionally will take on the go, because let's be honest, this is going to be mostly a desktop replacement, something that you're gonna mostly have in one spot that you're occasionally gonna need to move. If that sounds like something you need, and again, you're okay with the weight, and maybe you're okay with some of the quirkiness with the designs, and this is an excellent choice. So thank you again for checking out this review. This has been Paul with MakeUseOf.com. Let us know your thoughts on this laptop in the comments down below, and until the next one, we'll catch you later.